This is part 5 of Clockwork. When Prince Otto married his Princess Mariposa, the whole city rejoiced. Fireworks were lit in the public gardens, bands played all night in the ballrooms, and flags and banners waved from every rooftop. "At last we'll have an heir," the people said. They had been afraid that the dynasty would come to an end. But time went by, and more time. No child came to Prince Otto and Princess Mariposa. They sought the opinions of the finest doctors, but still no child came. They made a pilgrimage to Rome to seek the blessings of the Holy Father, but still no child came. Finally, as Princess Mariposa stood at the palace window, she heard the chiming of the cathedral clock, and said, "I wish I had a child as sound as a bell and as true as a clock." And when she had said those words, she felt her heart lift. And before the year was out, she did have a child, but alas for her and for everyone, her labour was hard and painful. And when the baby had taken one breath in this world, he could take no more, and he died in the arms of the nurse. Princess Mariposa knew nothing of that, for she was in a dreadful swoon, and no one could say whether she would live or die. As for Prince Otto, he was nearly out of his mind with fury. He snatched the dead child from the nurse's arms and said, "I will have an heir, come what may." He ran down to the stables and ordered the grooms to saddle his fastest horse. With the dead child clasped to his breast, he galloped away. Where was he going? North, and further north, until he came to the workshop of Dr. Calmenius, near the silver mines of Schatzberg. There it was that the great clockwork maker created his wonders, from the celestial clocks that told the position of every planet for the next 25,000 years, to the little figures that danced and rode miniature ponies, and shot tiny arrows and played the harpsichord. "Well," said Dr. Calmenius. Prince Otto stood in his riding cloak with the snow still white on his shoulders, and held out the body of his child. "Make me another child," he said. "My son is dead, and his mother lies between life and death. Dr. Calmenius, I command you to make me a child of clockwork who will not die." Even Prince Otto, in his madness, didn't believe that a clockwork toy could resemble a living child. But the silver they mined in Schatzberg was not the same as other metals. It was malleable and soft and lustrous, with a bloom on it like that on a butterfly's wing. And as for the great clockwork maker, the task was a challenge to his artistry that he couldn't resist. And so, while Prince Otto buried the dead child, Dr. Calmenius set to work to make the new one. He smelted the ore and refined the silver, and beat it into a subtle thinness. He spun gold into filaments finer than spider's milk, and attached each one separately to the little head. He cast and filed and tempered. He soldered and riveted and bolted. He timed and adjusted and regulated, until the little mainspring was tight, and the little escapement on its jewelled bearings was ticking back and forth with perfect accuracy. When the clockwork child was ready, Dr. Calmenius gave him to Prince Otto, who scrutinized him carefully. The baby was breathing and moving and smiling, and even, by some secret art, warm. In every way he looked exactly like the child who had died. Prince Otto wrapped his cloak around the baby and rode back to the palace, where he laid the child in the arms of Princess Mariposa, and the princess opened her eyes, and the joy of seeing her own child, as she thought, alive and well, brought her back from the brink of the grave. Besides, she looked so pretty with the child in her arms, she had always known she would. They named him Florian. A year went by, 2 years, 3, and the little boy grew up beloved by everyone, happy and sturdy and clever. Prince Otto took him riding on a little pony, taught him to shoot a bow and arrow. He danced, he picked out tunes on the harpsichord. He grew stronger and bigger, more merry and lively all the time. But in the 5th year of his life, the little prince began to show signs of a disturbing illness. There was a painful stiffness in his joints. He had a constant feeling of chill, and his face, which was normally so lively and expressive, was becoming mask-like and rigid. Princess Mariposa was worried to distraction. He no longer looked nearly so handsome next to her. "Can't you do something to cure him?" she demanded of the royal physician. The physician tapped the boy's chest and looked at his tongue and felt his pulse. It was like no disease he had ever seen. If he hadn't known the prince was a little boy, he'd have said he was seizing up like a rusty clock, but he could hardly say that to Princess Mariposa. "Nothing to worry about," he said. "It's a condition known as inflammatory oxidosis. Give him 2 spoonfuls of cod liver oil 3 times a day, and rub his chest with oil of lavender." The only one to suspect the truth was his father, and so Prince Otto set off once again for the mines of Schatzberg, and knocked at the door of Dr. Calmenius's workshop. "Well," said the clockwork maker. Prince Florian is ill, said Prince Otto. What can we do? He described the symptoms, and Dr. Calmenius shrugged his shoulders. It's in the nature of clockwork to run down, was the answer. His mainspring was bound to weaken, his escapement to become clogged with dust. I can tell you what will happen next. His skin will stiffen and crack, and split from top to bottom to reveal nothing but dead, seized up metal inside him. He will never work again. But why didn't you tell me this would happen? You were in such a hurry that you didn't ask. Can't you just wind him up? Impossible. But what can we do? Said Prince Otto in his rage and despair. Is there nothing that can save his life? I must have an heir. The survival of the royal family depends on it. There is one thing, said Dr. Calmenius. He is failing because he has no heart. Find him a heart and he will live. But I don't know where you'll find a heart in good condition that its owner is willing to part with. Besides, but Prince Otto had already left. He didn't stop to hear the rest of what Dr. Calmenius was going to say. That's often the way with princes. They want instant solutions, not difficult ones that take time and care to bring about. What the great clockwork maker had been going to say was this: the heart that is given must also be kept. But quite possibly Prince Otto wouldn't have understood anyway. He rode back to the palace, turning the problem over in his mind. And what a dilemma! To save his son, he had to sacrifice another human being. What could he do, and whom could he ask to make such a great sacrifice? And then he thought of the Baron Stelgratz. Of course, there was no one better. Baron Stelgratz was an old, trusted adviser, a staunch friend, faithful, brave, and true. The little prince loved him, and he and the Baron used to play for hours and mock battles with Prince Florian's toy soldiers, and the good old nobleman would teach him how to handle a sword or fire a pistol, and tell him all about the animals of the forest. The more Prince Otto thought about it, the better a choice it seemed. Baron Stelgratz would leap at the chance to give his heart for the family. Better not tell him yet, though. Better wait till they were at Dr. Calmenius's workshop. Then he would see the necessity quite clearly. When Prince Otto arrived back at the palace, he found that the little prince had got worse. He could hardly walk without falling over stiffly, and his voice, which had been so full of life and laughter, was becoming more and more like a musical box. He said very little, but he sang the same few songs over and over. It was clear that he wouldn't last very long, so Prince Otto went straight to the princess and persuaded her that a few days hunting, some brisk exercise in the forest, would do the little child a power of good. Furthermore, he said, Baron Stelgratz would come too. No harm would come to Florian in the Baron's company. So Prince Otto wrapped the little boy up well and set him in the sledge with Baron Stelgratz beside him, and off they set. But on the way through the forest, as darkness was falling, the sledge was attacked by wolves. Maddened by hunger, the great grey beasts poured out of the trees and sprang up as the horses. Prince Otto lashed his whip furiously, and the sledge leapt forwards, with the wolves tearing after. Prince Florian sat beside the Baron, gripping the side of the sledge, and watched fearfully as the wolf pack raced closer and closer. Baron Stelgratz emptied his rifle at the pack of leaping, slavering beasts, without deterring them in the least, and the sledge bumped and swayed from side to side on the rough track. At any moment they might crash, and then they would all perish. "Highness," cried the Baron, "there is only one thing to do, and I do it with all my heart." And the good old man threw himself off the sledge. To save his friends, he sacrificed himself. Instantly, the wild wolves turned on him and tore him to pieces, and the sledge drove on into the silent forest, leaving the snarling, howling beasts far behind. And now, what could Prince Otto do? Drive on was the only answer. Drive on. And hope to find some lonely huntsman or woodcutter to compensate their family later on. But not a single human being came into view. Behind Prince Otto, the little child, wrapped in furs, was huddled alone on the bouncing seat of the sledge, stiffening, growing colder, changing back into a machine minute by minute. Occasionally the movement of the sledge would shake a little song out of him, but he spoke no more. Finally they arrived at the mines of Schatzberg and the house of the clockwork maker. And there was only one solution. Prince Otto realized that he had to sacrifice himself, and he was ready. The dynasty was more important than anything else, more important than happiness, than love, than truth, than peace, than honor, far more important than his own life. Prince Otto would give up his heart, cold, fanatical and proud as it was, for the sake of the future glory of the royal house. "You're quite sure this is what you want?" said Dr. Calminius. "Don't argue with me. Take out my heart and put it in my child's breast. It doesn't matter if I die, as long as the dynasty lives." The problem now was not the heart, it was the return. How could the child drive back on his own? So for an extra payment, Dr. Calminius agreed to animate the dead body of Prince Otto with a small degree of purpose, just enough to drive the sledge back to the palace. The operation was performed. Prince Otto's heart was detached from his breast with subtle instruments and transferred into the weak and failing body of the silver boy. Instantly, a bright flush of health took the place of Prince Florian's metallic pallor. His eyes opened, and a lively vigour spread through all his limbs. He was alive. Meanwhile, Dr. Calminius prepared a simple piece of clockwork apparatus to put in the breast of Prince Otto. It was very crude. When it was wound up, it would make his body drive to the palace. That was all it would do, but it would do it for a long, long time. If Prince Otto's body had been taken to the other side of the world, it would have set off at once for home, though the flesh rotted and fell off his bones and would never stop until many years later, when his skeleton drove the sledge into the courtyard with the clockwork ticking in his ribs. So Dr. Calminius placed the sleeping body of Prince Florian in the sledge, well wrapped up against the cold, and put the whip into the hand of his dead father, who began at once to lash and lash and lash, and the horses, foaming with terror, began their mad gallop homewards. And a strange homecoming they had of it. You might have heard the tale of how the sledge drove in at the palace gates, and how the royal physician found the clockwork heart. The servants whispered about the dead man whose arm wouldn't keep still, and rumours and guesses flew through the palace and the city like shuttles in a loom, weaving a story of corpses and ghosts, of curses and devils, of death and life and clockwork. But no one knew the truth. So time passed. They searched for the baron, they mourned for Prince Otto. Princess Mariposa wept very fetchingly in her widow's black, and Prince Florian grew. 5 more years went by, and everyone said how handsome the little prince was, how merry and good, how lucky they were to have such a child as the heir of the family. But as the winter of the prince's 10th year set in, the dreaded symptoms returned. Prince Florian complained of pains in his joints, of a stiffness in his arms and legs, of a constant chill, and his voice lost its human expressiveness, and took on the tinkling sound of a music box. Just as before, the royal physician was baffled. "He has inherited this disease from his father," he said. "There can be no question about that." "What disease is it?" said Princess Mariposa. "A congenital weakness of the heart," said the physician, sounding as if he knew, "combined with inflammatory oxidosis. But if you remember, Your Highness, we cured that last time by means of healthy exercise in the forest. What Prince Florian needs is a week at the hunting lodge. But last time he went with his father and Baron Stelratz, and you know what happened then." "Ah, medical science has advanced wonderfully in the past 5 years," said the physician. "Have no fear, Your Highness. We shall arrange a hunting trip for the little prince, and he will come back glowing with health, just as he did before." But it seemed that the courtiers had less faith in the advance of medical science than the physician, for all they remembered what had happened last time, and none of them wanted to risk a journey through the forest, even if it was to save Prince Florian. This one had gout, that one had an urgent appointment in Venice, another had to visit his aged grandmother in Berlin, and so on, and so on. There was no question of the physician himself going. He was needed every moment at the palace, in case of an emergency. And Princess Mariposa could not possibly go, because the winter air was so bad for her complexion. Finally, because there was no one else to do it, they called up one of the grooms and offered him 10 silver pieces to take little Prince Florian to the hunting lodge. In advance, the man said, because he had heard the story of what had happened before, and wanted to be sure of his money if anything went wrong. So they gave him the silver in advance. The groom tucked Prince Florian into the sledge and harnessed the horses. Princess Mariposa waved from the window as they drove away. When they had gone some way into the forest, the groom thought, "I don't think this kid can last another day. He looks pretty bad to me. If I go back and tell them he's died, they're bound to punish me. On the other hand, with 10 silver pieces and this sledge, I can make my way over the border and set up in business on my own account. Buy a little inn, maybe find a wife and have some children of my own. Yes, that's what I'll do. There's nothing that can save this little fellow." I'm doing him a kindness, really. It's a mercy, that's what it is." So he stopped the sledge at a crossroads and put Prince Florian out. "Go on," the groom said. "Go on. You're on your own now. I can't look after you anymore. Have a good brisk walk. Stretch your legs. Off you go." And he drove away. Prince Florian obediently started to walk. His legs were very stiff, and the snow lay thickly on the road. But he kept going till he turned a bend and looked down at a little town silent under the moon, where a bell in a church tower was chiming midnight. A light was glowing in the window of an inn, and an old black cat watched from the shadows. Prince Florian struggled up to the door and opened it. Being unable to speak, he politely began to sing his one remaining song.